Joining us now, Wednesday regular TSN Hockey Insider, and of course, one half of the Rain Drags Hockey Podcast here on the Go Sports family of podcasts, Mr. Darren Dreger. How you doing, busy boy? It's your time of year.
Yeah, it is busy, and that's not unusual following the Horvat trade. Doesn't feel like anything is imminent, but now you've got scenarios and situations where teams are trying to clarify injury status, as an example. I think the Columbus Blue Jackets have suggested that Gus Nyquist, is done for the year with a shoulder injury, but the information I received today was, no, that's not the case. I mean, he's going to be out till late in the regular season, but he'll be ready, the shoulder injury with a week, 10 days or so left in the regular season, certainly for the playoffs. And the only reason that matters is obviously because he's a trade chip. Right. And maybe there are there are teams that are looking for an ad like that. But there's a difference between being done for the season and being 100% playoff ready. I mean, a team might step up before March 3rd and say, OK, well, we see the medical evidence. He should be good to go. Let's take a bit of a gamble. So there's that kind of dialogue and tire kicking that's happening right now.
And that was one of the considerations and debates we were having on this program with regards to Bo Horvat is how long do you let him play here? Do you hold him out of games? Of course, the injury would have been a catastrophe. He does get moved. Jim Rutherford, true to form, an early mover here, Dregs. And look, I saw the Kevin Weeks tweet about how there was another team deeply involved and the Canucks didn't shop the offer. What's your understanding of how this came down at the nitty-gritty? Were there other teams involved? Were there other teams close? Did the Canucks shop the offer or just zone in on what the Islanders had to part with?
I don't believe that they shopped the offer, Matt, but I do know that Patrick Allvin contacted teams and acknowledged that they were ready to move on something that was fairly substantive. And that would align with what they had on the table with the New York Islanders or how far along they were in that process. But I don't believe that Allvin reached out to teams to say, okay, here are the specifics of what we have that has been offered. If you can better it, you've got an hour to figure that out. I don't think it got to that point. And look, that would be out of respect to the process too, not just Lou Lamoriello. We know that Lou holds his cards tight to the vest, which is why none of us who are pretty good at identifying primary trade targets didn't acknowledge the New York Islanders as being a big player in the sweepstakes for Bo Horvat. And that is by design by Lou Lamoriello. He would literally say to Patrick Allvin, I shouldn't have to tell you this because you're associated with Jim Rutherford. None of this gets out. Zero, or I'm pulling it off the table. I'm not certain that conversation was had, but I know Lou has had that conversation with others, and I also know that the trade caught Pat Morris, the agent, by surprise. So that tells you how kind of cloak and dagger this was.
From an Islanders standpoint, did Lou get into this at the last second, do you think, or was he kind of poking his head in and out of this for a while?
I don't think that he got in at the last second. I think the latter is more applicable here, Blake. That wouldn't be Lou's style. Now, does he contemplate and then does he look at his own team and, look at the depth that he has or doesn't have and identify certain players? Probably, but I can't imagine that he swooped in and said, okay, well, here are the three pieces that we're going to give you. We know you're asking for a first-round pick, but it has to be lottery protected. Anthony Beauvillier is going to be part of it, and Ratu needs to be a part of it. Does that work? I mean, there had to have been some back and forth, and I feel like, Vancouver obviously would have wanted some experience in Beauvillier and the center position covered to some degree, along with the first-round draft pick, which I think was significant in this return. And I could tell you that that's what caught the interest of many teams around the league. Now, you're talking about top of class here for the most part. When you look at Bo Horvat and the season that he's having, you could say the same of Ryan O'Reilly, but he's hurt and he's going to be out for an extended period of time. But you like the history of O'Reilly. So Doug Armstrong is probably sitting there going, ooh, okay, good. That kind of sets the market. If you're the Montreal Canadiens and you've got pieces that you want to throw in play here when you get healthy. I mean, Ken Hughes has made it public. He wants 3 first-round draft picks in the June draft. Wishful thinking, but as soon as one goes, which it did in the Horvat deal, then that helps to kind of solidify that market.
Which is more likely, that Horvat signs an extension here, or do you think there's a world, because the Islanders are anything but ironclad for the playoffs?
Yeah.
If they have a little stumble, and they're hoping they won't because they've got Horvat now,
right?
I mean, would Lou consider flipping him, or do you think he just absolutely unequivocally wants to sign him?
Well, I do think he wants to sign him, but flipping him can't be dismissed because of what you just said. I think it would take more than a little backpedal for the New York Islanders to shift that drastically. But if they completely fall out of the playoff picture in the next 3-4 weeks here, then I think that conversation has to be had, especially if Bo isn't convinced that he wants to tie his wagon to the New York Islanders. Now, as Pierre LeBrun talked about in insider trading, we believe that the Islanders would have been a significant player in the Horvat run as an unrestricted free agent in the summer. And Bo Horvat, has time for the New York Islanders. And it is unlike Lou to spend fairly heavily on a pure rental. So he's going to do everything he can in short order to try and get Bo Horvat extended. You know what? As you look at the New York Islanders, he looks like a real good fit there. He does, for everything that he brings, especially offensively. I think when Lou made the coaching change, he thought that an injection of a different philosophy, maybe a little bit more offensive minded, would change things, but they'd find a way and the group would manage it. And that hasn't been the case. I mean, you look at the numbers for Matt Barzal, you look at some of the numbers for some of the other forwards, they just have not delivered. So Horvat is going to help them in that sense. But if he doesn't, and there's no contract extension, and he's not sure that it's a fit for his family, then, obviously you have to consider the trade idea on March 3rd.
It's been 2 months since Thatcher Demko has played for the Vancouver Canucks. You guys addressed it on Trade Center, which I was very happy to see, because I was going to ask you, coming on the show today, why are we hearing Thatcher Demko's name in trade rumors, Drex?
Yeah, 'tis the season, right, Matt? And you also have to then analyze where the Vancouver Canucks are. And you always have to leave a little bit of wiggle room in thinking that anything is possible. But the information that I have from excellent sources is that, number one, they need Thatcher Demko healthy. That's priority, is getting him back onto the ice, getting his game back in shape. Because, look, Vancouver wants to go through this retool the right way. And, you have to keep at least a competitive environment, or your fan base will revolt more than it already has. Nobody wants to watch a stinker for the next couple of years. And they shouldn't be. They should be competitive with the pieces that they have. But for me, that includes, good goaltending. And Thatcher Demko has proven, maybe not this year, certainly last year, that he can be a very good goaltender. I know that's the thinking of management, and they're as surprised and confused as anyone as to where this trade speculation is coming from. But I always want to just hedge a little bit, because as soon as managers and pro scouts get wind of trade speculation, what do? Well, they encourage their managers to make a call, find out. So, you always have to leave at least a little bit of room for the ridiculous, and a trade offer that, the Vancouver Canucks just couldn't deny. I don't see that happening. That's not the want of the Vancouver Canucks, nor is it the want of Thatcher Demko. My understanding is he wants to stay in Vancouver, so we'll watch it, but it seems unlikely.
Who is, what are the teams looking for goaltending, Dregs? Like, who would be in the mix on a Demko trade if he were available? Who's hunting goaltending by the deadline?
Well, but that's the issue there, Matt, right? I mean, I'm sure there are teams out there that are recognizing that it would help to have a little bit of at least insurance in the position of goal. LA comes to mind. Vamelka's been connected to the LA Kings, although my sources tell me that's not the case. It depends on who it is. If it's Thatcher Demko, I think that there'd be a number of teams that can create, why he would make a lot of sense moving forward. But as LeBrun talked about in insider trading as well, Rob Blake and the Los Angeles Kings are okay with their goaltending. They're okay with it. I mean, Jonathan Quick is back, so let's see if he can, regain his form. I mean, the notion that the LA Kings are going to add big pieces certainly up front, that was the expectation near the beginning of the year, is out of respect to Jonathan Quick and Andrzej Kopitar and trying to challenge for another Stanley Cup. So they'll need Jonathan Quick to do that. So any sort of goaltending, big deal goaltending in LA seems to more likely to drag into the summer.
Luke Schenn, obviously, is another option for the Canucks here before the deadline. Oh, maybe Brock Boeser, but it sounds like that's got to be gymnastics in order to, unless somebody goes on a tear. I mean, can a Garland or a Boeser play themselves into an asset in the next, 10 games here?
I think Boeser can. I'm a little bit skeptical with Connor Garland, with all due respect. And that's just feedback from managers who have interest in Brock Boeser. I mean, the managers with the most interest in Boeser look at him as being a 25-goal guy. That's what they see in the right productive environment. There was this misconception way back when that the Vancouver Canucks weren't in a position to retain salary. They didn't want to do that. Well, they did it marginally in the Horvat deal. Okay, that's short term. Are they willing to do it with Brock Boeser? And the answer to that is yes, they are. But the offer has to justify, the Vancouver Canucks taking another financial bite. And so far, obviously, that hasn't happened. For me, it still feels like the smart money is on this not happening between now and the March 3rd trade deadline, more likely happening in the off season. But man, it can take an injury. It can take an owner that sees a spike and wants his team to just go after it, find a way, and things can change pretty quickly with a phone call. So I know there's interest. I know that there's been, I would say a reasonable amount of interest over time expressed in Boeser.
And on Schenn himself, is that in the short term, do you think, or does that take a few weeks? I saw some reference that there might be a child on the way and he might want to get settled before the trade deadline. Well,
and I think if that is true, I didn't know that. But I know how highly the Canucks management think of Luke Schenn. Mm-hmm. And if that is the case, that would be a motivating factor, regardless of what the return is. I mean, when you're waiting to move a piece like that, you're waiting again for an injury or for a team, excuse me, guys, to step up. But if there's a family reason that encourages it, then I suspect that the Canucks would do right by Luke Schenn because, look, I mean, the reason he's still in Vancouver is not just because of his play and how stable he's been, but everything that he brings to the organization in the room, on the bench, off the ice, all of those things.
Marvelous stuff, Dregs. We thank you for this. We'll let you get back at it during deadline season. We'll catch up next Wednesday.
Okay, guys, have a good one.